What could Sega have done in order to make this system really succeed and not literally end them as a hardware company?
Yeah. I think part of the problem was that Sega was really tone deaf by the late 90s. They didn't understand the market, where the market was, where it was headed, what gamers were really into. Sega had spent the first part of their career porting over arcade games to home consoles, and that was a big selling point even as far back as the Genesis. It was like, hey, you can play your Golden Axe, and you got your...
Remember the commercial? The kid is in his room, and the parents open the door with the arcade cabinet, and they said, "We got your Golden Axe." And he looks around. He has a Genesis controller, and he's like, "Oh, okay, but I already have that."
Yeah. Sega spent a lot of effort trying to, in their marketing, convincing gamers that this, if you want to play arcade games at home, this is where you need to be. And it worked out for them really well during the early years of all of the, the Golden Axes and the Altered Beast. Not Sega Rally, with the other racing Outrun, yes.
Yeah.
And so they were porting all these games, and it worked out, and they even managed to kind of stretch that through the mid-90s with
Virtual Fighter,
with the Virtual Fighter
Racing,
and, exactly.
Virtual everything. Everything was virtual.
Yeah. But by the late 90s, gamers had kind of grown up.
Yeah.
And in 1997, what was the big game that everybody was playing?
GoldenEye.
And it was not, all the PC first-person shooter nerds were like, I'd rather have my mouse and my keyboard and whatever. But to us console people, this was a big deal.
To the console people, it was the first time that we had ever experienced something like that. Yeah. And the goal of that was to just kill the other people.
Yeah.
And you're right. The PC gamers, they probably already experienced that with, I don't know, Quake or Half-Life.
They would have their LAN parties and whatnot.
Sure.
And, in 1997, I mean, most of us were in our generation, were either in high school or maybe college by then.
Yep.
And this was the game. I mean, it took over college dorms. It took over our living room. All of our friends' living room. Yeah. They followed that up with Perfect Dark. It was a solid follow-up, and everyone loved it. But by 1999, fast forward to the Dreamcast, it was obvious to me and to people who were paying attention that this is kind of where the future of gaming was going. Yep. Not just four-player action, but specifically first-person shooters on a console. GoldenEye proved that was viable, not just on PC, but on a console. And gamers were growing up, and this is where the market was headed. What did Sega do in 1999 for the launch of the Dreamcast? Shenmue, Power Stone, Sonic Adventure, a crap load of shovelware. How many fishing games were on the Dreamcast? You gotta be kidding me, Sega.
Yeah.
There were a couple of first-person shooters that were basically PC ports. That's an awful game. Don't ever play that game. How are you supposed to control... the N64 was a better controller than this.
Yeah. This controller is one button ahead of the Super Nintendo. Because the Super Nintendo had this, and this. It just didn't have this.
But this is almost worthless without one on the right.
Right.
So Sega really, really needed to have one of these over here, Xbox style, PlayStation style, so that you can control a character in a 3D environment. And that would have been a game changer. I really do believe that if they would have had that control scheme. Because try playing Tomb Raider. Try playing these Sega Dreamcast games with this controller.
Awful.
They are unplayable. Yeah. They're not just bad.
And we'll show you some footage.
So
we just played a handful of the Dreamcast games. These are the only ones that I own currently. Sonic Adventure.
I owned it back in the day. I did play.
You played it more than I did back in the day. I never owned it back in the day, and I tried playing. The game starts by putting you in a boss battle.
Yeah, like a mini boss fight.
Like a mini boss fight. That's how the game starts off.
And it's frustrating, and it's...
And I died like 5 times. So I put in World Series Baseball 2001, and I pushed the start to think just the free play arcade, whatever they called it.
Sure.
And then I couldn't figure out if I was pitching or batting.
Yeah.
And then eventually I just set the controller down, And the game played itself, and I realized I wasn't doing anything.
Maybe you were controlling the right fielder.
I have no idea what I was doing in that game. Fighting Force 2. I mean, this is almost embarrassing to say, but what would you say I spent in this game? 10 minutes trying to figure out what to do. There was one enemy. I killed him, and he literally disappeared, so I know he died. And then I walked around really awkwardly in this very small area for about 10 minutes, and I never did anything. And there was a train, and at one point, I randomly blew up. I lived, but I spontaneously combusted or something. It was very strange. This is a very weird game, and then I turned it off. Oh boy. Oh boy.
Shoot me now.
There's a reason she comes with 2 guns, because I think you're supposed to use one of those guns to blow your brains out.
Yeah, it's awful.
I can't even think of an adjective to describe how horrible this game controls.
And again, they start you out very first level in like this really enclosed room, like a sort of industrial factory. You're not really sure where you are. It's so not obvious and so unintuitive. Like, where do I go? What do I do? And that's how they start you out. Like, come on.
No, I mean,
awful.
It's so bad. This is Bust-A-Move 4.
Bust-A-Move's fun. It's not an exclusive Sega game. I mean, it was available for all kinds of stuff.
And it was fun. It's a fun puzzler. I don't know that this would have a Tetris effect on me, where I would just spend
stay awake
hours
at night visualizing everything.
I don't know if that would happen, but again, it seemed like a fun puzzler, and I don't know. How many puzzle games existed by 1999?
A lot.
100? Crazy Taxi. So this was a game that you had back in the day?
I did, yeah.
So talk about real quick your experience and how you came across getting a Dreamcast when it came out.
I got a Dreamcast because it was dirt cheap. It was literally like a year after it came out, and I was at Toys R Us, and they had a whole pallet stacked with Dreamcast, and I want to say they were $29.99 each. I had everything there was to have. I had PlayStation 1, I had Nintendo, whatever. And I didn't have a Dreamcast, and I was like, for $30, whatever. The games were dirt cheap. I had Crazy Taxi, I had Sonic Adventure, I had Soul Calibur, I had, I don't know what other games I had. They were all very cheap, and so I just bought it. And Crazy Taxi, again, was Sega's attitude of everybody wants our arcade ports, right? So this was an arcade game. And the game itself, it's fun for 5 minutes. That's what an arcade game is designed to do. They want to suck your quarters, and it's not a deep, rich gaming experience. It's just fun for a few minutes at a time, and then you shut it off. And that was the game.
You picture like when the Sega Genesis came out, the marketing was, all those arcade games that you've been playing for the last 5 years? You can now have that arcade experience at home. And people really latched onto that during the early 90s.
Right.
In 1999, they're still doing the same thing. They're saying, hey, those arcade games that you love, that you've been playing for the last 5 years? You can have that experience at home. But
arcades by the late 90s, I mean, they had changed into like these... You had to have a bunch of these games where you try to win tickets and stuff because they couldn't stay open otherwise.
And not only that, but you would go up to like the Mortal Kombat 3 or the Mortal Kombat 4 arcade cabinet, and you would play it, and you would kind of go, yeah, that's just like my N64 version, or that's just like my PlayStation version. The difference between arcades and home consoles was really getting thin. Going to the arcade was no longer that thing that just blew you away. From the mid-90s on, gamers were maturing, they were becoming adults, they were really looking for richer experiences. Even, I'll say, a lot of Saturn games. They had a lot of RPGs on the Saturn and the Sega CD.
A lot.
The PS1 was giving us a lot of great RPGs, which you and I were into. The idea of just picking up a game for a quick beat-em-up or a quick race to get that arcade high of some kind, that didn't really do it for most gamers anymore. But Sega didn't understand that.
And then when the Dreamcast came out, they put a lot on games like Shenmue and Seaman, or Seabiscuit, or whatever that's called. And it was like, these games were quirky and original, and some people liked them, but like these are not system sellers.
So that's the first problem I think they had. Soul Calibur, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Mars Matrix for a shooting game. I mean, everyone says, oh, these are great games, but these are more or less arcade-style games. So if Sega had done this, the Dreamcast would have succeeded in spades.
Yep.
And that is, give us a controller with another stick over here, and give us a first-person shooter.
And you had 4 controller ports with the Dreamcast.
They had 4 controller ports.
Great move. PlayStation 2 didn't even have 4 controller ports. Perfect Dark should have clued them in on that.
It should have clued. And honestly, Nintendo should have gotten the same message, and they didn't.
Yeah.
Nintendo never gave us that experience again.
They should have known that first-person shooters were going to take over the world for the next decade. And for proof, look what happened in the next decade. Halo, Call of Duty. Look at the best-selling games from the 2000s decade. The best-selling games.
Call of Duty.
Probably a Grand Theft Auto in there. Yeah. But Call of Duty and Halo are gonna just wipe. That could have been Sega.
Yeah. When the original Xbox came out and it launched with Halo, everyone kind of went, "Wait, Microsoft is in the console industry now? Okay, well, I'm not so sure about this." And then you eventually, either at a friend's house or whatever,
you played Halo.
Without the choppiness and the glitchiness of like GoldenEye that you will remember just a few years ago.
Yeah. And you picked up that controller.
You picked up the controller.
2 thumbsticks.
2 thumbsticks.
And it was like, yes, this is what I've been waiting for.
This is what I've been waiting for my entire life. I just didn't know it.
Yep.
But this is what I wanted. And as a result, Microsoft ended up being a huge player in the console market to this day because of that one game. Now, if the Dreamcast had had a Halo
with a better controller,
with a controller that could have done it with a thumbstick over here, and if they had done it right,
they could have moved a lot of systems.
Word would have gotten out so fast, and it would have spread around like wildfire. And before you would have known it, college dorms everywhere and living rooms everywhere would have been full of people playing this game. Instead, they didn't get that. And then a couple of years later, Microsoft gave that to everybody.
Microsoft saw that coming.
Wow.
They saw it coming so much that they just went out and said, okay, who's making the next first-person shooter? Bungie. Okay, buy them out.
Yep.
You're part of us now, and you're going to make Halo an exclusive for Xbox. And the rest is history.
We're living in Redmond. Went over to your house. Knew that you were playing a lot of Halo, but I remember I walked in the door one time, and I saw an additional television, and I saw a whole bunch of other guys. And then I went into the back rooms, and there were more televisions, and more guys, and more Xboxes. And you literally had 4 televisions, 4 Xboxes, and at least 16 guys over, and they were all having
all the time.
A LAN party. Yep. And this is the first time I had ever experienced that. And I walked in, like, where am I, and what is happening? And every single person was staring at this television with this controller and this machine that Microsoft had made. And
probably swearing at me for beating them.
Probably, because you were so good at it. There was something there that grabbed everybody. Microsoft saw that.
Females!
And as a result,
my own sister was really into Halo.
Yeah.
The multiplayer.
And Mom and Dad were.
My parents got into it. These were people that, they play Pinochle and watch Jeopardy every night and go to bed by 9 o'clock, and then like, oh, we're playing Halo, and I'm like, what?
All of that took over living rooms, and I think the bottom line is, you know what? That could have been Sega. Sega could have been you. Yep. It wasn't. It was Microsoft.
Sega fumbled, and Microsoft was there to recover. This first-person shooter business is no joke, and this is going to take over gaming for the next... And I say the next decade. We're going on 2 decades now. What was the best-selling game of the year last year?
Call of Duty.
Call of Duty.
What was your best-selling game the year before that?
Probably another Call of Duty.
Probably another Call of Duty.
I don't even know. They're at the top of the charts. Say what you want about them. Say what you want about going online and playing with a bunch of 12-year-old kids who scream racial slurs at you and how dumb that is. These games sell, man. And we're going on 2 decades now of this. And like I said, could have been Sega. They didn't get it. They're too busy bringing home a home port of Virtua Racing and Virtua Fighter 3 TB. What does it even mean?
Bring the arcade home.
TB?
Okay.
Who cares?
Nobody cares anymore, Sega.
Yeah.
And I probably gave this away already, but you lived in Redmond at the time, Redmond, Washington, which is where Microsoft is located.
And Nintendo of America.
And Nintendo. But you and I knew a lot of guys that had worked for Microsoft at the time, even on the Xbox team at the time.
Yep.
And these guys were all our age or a little bit older.
Yeah.
And you can tell these guys had a passion for it. These were the guys that had GoldenEye in their dorm rooms.
Yes.
And they had a passion, and they were on a mission to make a game like GoldenEye, but do it right. And they did it. And they nailed it.